They tell you to be grateful, grateful for what you have, grateful for who you are, grateful that it's not worse. But Friedrich Nietzsche saw this as a trap, a quiet, moral cage disguised as virtue. Because what they call gratitude, Nietzsche called submission. Gratitude, when forced, is the softest kind of slavery. It teaches you to celebrate your chains, to smile at your limitations, to accept your station in life because someone else has it worse. And when you accept your station, you stop climbing, you stop demanding, you stop reaching, you become manageable. That's what society wants. Gratitude has been weaponized to protect the status quo. You're told to be thankful for crumbs because someone else has less. You're told to admire humility in failure, not ambition in rebellion. You're told to count your blessings, not count your missed opportunities. And Nietzsche would say, of course they tell you that, because if you woke up from it, you'd become dangerous. He wasn't against thankfulness itself. He was against the moral structure built around it. The idea that your duty is to be content, that virtue lives in quiet acceptance, that resentment is evil, that ambition is prideful, that rage is shameful. He saw all of it as a kind of moral sedation, a psychological drug administered by weaker minds who feared the awakening of stronger ones. Because what happens when a person stops being grateful? They start asking, why do I serve this system? Why do I endure this boss, this life, this place? Why do I thank the gods, my parents, my past, for making me small? Nietzsche called this awakening the path of the Übermensch, the one who breaks the illusion, who stops living according to borrowed values, and begins creating his own. And to do that, you must first kill the obligation to be grateful. Gratitude keeps you looking backward. Nietzsche wanted you to look forward, through, above, beyond. When you stop clinging to what you have, you're free to chase what you want. Real desire. Real hunger. Not this tamed, pre-approved version of ambition handed down by society. And that's what scared people. That's why Nietzsche was demonized. Because he told the truth no one wanted to hear. That gratitude is often the moral language of the conquered. Your gratitude makes others comfortable. They don't have to explain why you're underpaid, why you were born into suffering, why your genius is overlooked. They just say, be grateful. And when you obey, the conversation ends. No revolution, no discomfort, no uprising, just a smile, just a thank you, just more silence. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a system where the powerless glorify their position to avoid the pain of confronting it. They say things like, it's okay, at least I'm alive, or others have it worse. Not because it's noble, but because it's easier than facing the truth. I want more. I deserve more. I was made for more. But wanting more is dangerous. It makes you unpredictable. It makes you impossible to control. And that's why the system wraps you in phrases like, stay humble, be thankful, don't complain. These aren't teachings. They're leashes. Gratitude, when authentic, can be beautiful. But when expected, it's a muzzle. Nietzsche's vision wasn't about tearing down all values. It was about tearing down the ones that weaken you. Gratitude, when turned into obligation, makes you passive. You don't leave the job. You don't confront the friend. You don't move to the city, end the relationship, chase the vision. You don't disrupt the mediocre life handed to you because you're taught it's ungrateful to want more. And wanting more is not evil. It's human. It's divine. It's the call that Nietzsche believed separates the creator from the crowd. But creators are feared because they burn the scripts others obey. They build new values. They don't say thank you for a broken system. They challenge it, mock it, outgrow it. And in doing so, they expose everyone else's comfort as fear in disguise. That's why Nietzsche said, what is happiness? The feeling that power is growing, that resistance is being overcome. Not contentment, not stillness, but movement, growth, becoming. And you cannot become anything if you're still grateful for what was forced on you. So you must ask yourself, where in your life have you mistaken submission for virtue? Where have you said thank you when you should have said no? Where have you told yourself to be content when you should have started a war? Because the world doesn't change through the grateful. It changes through the defiant. Nietzsche didn't want you to be bitter. He wanted you to be awake. To see that the people who preach gratitude the loudest are often the ones with the most to lose if you rise. They fear the moment you stop saying thank you and start asking, what if? What if I didn't accept this? What if I stopped being grateful for scraps? What if I stopped kneeling and started climbing? That's when the game changes. That's when you stop being a character in someone else's story and start becoming the author of your own. And gratitude fades, not because you're unkind, but because kindness doesn't require self-erasure, because self-worth doesn't require you to thank those who underestimated you, because real growth doesn't come from comfort, it comes from fire, hunger, conflict, evolution. Nietzsche saw the future of man as something to be created, not protected. And you cannot create anything while you're still apologizing for your dissatisfaction. So yes, be thankful when it's real, when it comes from joy, not fear, but never again let it be used to keep you silent, to keep you small, to make you forget the mountain still waiting to be climbed. Because Nietzsche didn't write for the ones who are grateful for what they've been given. He wrote for the ones who are no longer willing to say thank you, because they're too busy becoming what they were never supposed to be. Gratitude feels noble, until you realize it's been used to rob you of your ambition. That's the revelation Nietzsche forced upon his readers. He knew how morality had been twisted into a tool, how the virtues of the herd had been repackaged to sedate the strong. Gratitude wasn't exempt from this corruption. In fact, it was one of the most insidious. The gratitude they push on you isn't the sincere recognition of beauty or joy. It's the quiet resignation dressed as contentment. It tells you not to resist, not to question, not to want. Nietzsche saw this as a sickness, a philosophical virus that spreads under the guise of peace. He traced it back to religion, to institutions, to the moral systems that taught people to kneel before a god, to thank their suffering, to accept their fate because it had meaning. These ideas, he argued, weren't spiritual, they were strategic. The powerful taught the weak to be grateful so they wouldn't revolt. What better way to control a man than to convince him that he's morally superior for staying in his place? Nietzsche called for something else entirely, the revaluation of values, the destruction of moral idols, the burning of every false virtue that kept strong minds docile. Gratitude, in this context, was not enlightenment. It was tranquilized despair. Think about it. How many times have you been told to be grateful in moments where what you actually needed was clarity, or courage, or confrontation? Instead, you're handed a soft phrase, be thankful for what you have. Translation, don't ask for more, don't fight, don't grow. Nietzsche wanted to resurrect the will to power, not just over others, but over yourself. And this begins by identifying where your thoughts are no longer your own. Gratitude, if planted in you by the system, by guilt, by fear, it becomes a loop that pacifies every instinct you were born with to rise. He didn't romanticize suffering. He didn't say, be thankful for your pain. He said, overcome it. Use it, transcend it, but never lie to yourself about it. And that's the crime of fake gratitude. It teaches you to lie to yourself, to pretend you're okay when you're not, to smile at the very hand that limits you, to wear shackles and call them blessings. Nietzsche would rather you curse the world than bless your cage, not because negativity is noble, but because truth is. And if the truth is that you want more, then say it. If the truth is that your life has been too small for too long, then own it. If the truth is that you've been pretending to be grateful just to avoid conflict, then stop pretending. The Übermensch, the higher man Nietzsche envisioned, is not afraid of truth. He's fueled by it. He doesn't ask if it will be accepted. He asks if it's real. And that's where you separate yourself from the herd. The herd survives through shared delusion. They chant the same mantras, wear the same virtues, punish the same instincts. You were trained to thank your parents, your teachers, your bosses, your priests, not because they made you powerful, but because they made you compliant. And they feared the day you'd look back and say, you kept me small. But Nietzsche warned us, the day you stop pretending is the day they turn on you. They'll say you're bitter, arrogant, disrespectful, ungrateful. Good. Let them. Because every system that depends on your silence will accuse you of being ungrateful the moment you speak. Every person who's benefited from your submission will call your awakening selfish. Every society that fears change will call your ambition pride. They did the same to Nietzsche. They laughed at him, called him insane, mocked his solitude, because he refused to play the moral game. He refused to smile when something disgusted him. He refused to be polite when everything around him reeked of decay. And in doing so, he became immortal. Not because he bowed to gratitude, but because he spat in the face of hollow virtue and dared to rebuild meaning from the ruins. You must do the same. Gratitude is only noble when it's earned, not when it's demanded, not when it's used to shut you up, not when it's weaponized to stop your evolution. If you're thankful for what fuels you, good. But if you're thankful for what weakens you, then Nietzsche would say, you are not grateful, you are afraid. Afraid of confrontation, afraid of ambition, afraid of what you'll become if you stop saying thank you long enough to start saying, I want more, I will take more, I was made for more. That voice, the one inside you right now, is the enemy of fake gratitude. It doesn't want comfort. It wants freedom, and freedom demands a cost. It demands you let go of the warm praise that comes from obedience and walk into the cold fire of self-creation. Because that's what Nietzsche ultimately wanted. Not slaves who smile, but creators who rise. Not followers who bless their burdens, but individuals who turn pain into philosophy, resentment into rocket fuel, gratitude into conscious choice, not a default setting. And when you finally do that, when you speak without permission, when you stop kneeling to the illusion of moral submission, when you build your values from your own pain and power, then and only then, you'll be grateful. But this time, only to yourself. You were told to be grateful for what others gave you. Nietzsche would ask, what have you given yourself? Because the man who creates his own values, his own path, his own meaning, does not kneel to the altar of thank you. He stands over it, studies it, decides whether it still serves him, and if it doesn't, he leaves it behind like the grave of a god that stopped answering prayers. Nietzsche wasn't just rebelling against gratitude, he was rebelling against the expectation of it. That moral whisper telling you, be grateful you even got a chance. A chance at what? At obedience? At survival? At serving a dream that wasn't yours? He knew where this gratitude came from. From weak institutions that demanded respect without deserving it. From rulers who couldn't earn loyalty without moral blackmail. From parents, systems, cultures that taught you to shrink, to comply, to say thank you instead of why. He saw gratitude as a soft brick wall. You don't notice you're trapped behind it because it feels warm. You're encouraged to decorate it with spiritual quotes and humble acceptance. But it's still a wall. And the worst part? You build it yourself. Every time you bite your tongue and whisper, I should just be thankful. When your soul is screaming, I was made for more, you lay another brick. Nietzsche would say, stop building, turn around, tear it down. He didn't believe in comfort. He believed in becoming. And becoming requires conflict. Not just with the world, but with yourself. You must confront the voice that tells you you're selfish for wanting more. You must dismantle the stories you've been fed about humility and grace and gratitude. Because here's the secret. Most of them were never meant to help you. They were meant to tame you, to make sure you didn't question the unfair boss, to make sure you thanked the broken family for doing their best, to make sure you felt guilty for wanting something no one around you dared to chase, to make sure you stayed small enough to be celebrated, but never so large that you couldn't be controlled. Nietzsche's philosophy isn't about hatred, it's about truth, about standing naked before your desires, your pain, your rage, your strength, and saying, I do not owe anyone gratitude for the fire I had to walk through alone, because that fire is yours. The ashes are yours. The rebirth is yours. And when they come back, smiling, asking for thanks, because they gave you the match, the burden, the lesson, Nietzsche would remind you, you are not obligated to kiss the hand that held you down just because you learned how to stand on your own. Gratitude is not required for growth. It is not a prerequisite for decency. It is not a marker of maturity. It is a tool. And like any tool, it must be held, not worshipped. Use it when it builds strength. Use it when it reconnects you to love. Use it when it deepens truth. But the moment gratitude becomes a muzzle, a leash, a ritual you perform to avoid confrontation, drop it. Nietzsche believed in affirmation, but not of others, of life itself. He wanted you to say yes to life, to its pain, to its unfairness, to its raw, chaotic indifference. Not to smile through suffering, but to face it, transform it, rise above it. Not as a survivor who thanks the storm, but as a creator who builds something so powerful that the storm seems small in comparison. Because only then does gratitude become authentic. Not borrowed, not expected, not guilt-wrapped. Authentic gratitude isn't quiet, it's roaring. It's the moment you look at what you've become, despite everything they said would break you, and you feel grateful not for them, but for you. You survived you. You broke your own patterns. You rewrote the script. You stopped saying thank you for pain you didn't choose, and started saying you're welcome to the future you carved with bloody hands and your own broken teeth. That's the Nietzschean version of thanks. Not a bow, but a reignition. It's not thank you for what you gave me. It's I'll use it better than you ever could have. It's not thank you for teaching me. It's I made a truth from your lie. It's not thank you for loving me at my worst. It's I loved myself enough to outgrow you. Because Nietzsche never bowed. He descended into madness not because he failed, but because he saw too clearly. He peeled back the curtain and found a society built on borrowed values, stolen pride, and artificial virtue. And gratitude, false, weaponized gratitude, was one of its softest chains. So the next time you feel the pressure to be thankful, ask yourself, is this gratitude or is it guilt? Is this appreciation or is it survival? Is this love or is it fear dressed in politeness? If the answer is fear, Nietzsche gives you permission. Burn the script, refuse the thank you, and begin again, not as someone grateful for permission, but as someone terrifyingly free. When Nietzsche spoke of freedom, he didn't mean the right to vote, or the luxury to travel, or the ability to choose between 10 equally hollow lives. He meant something more violent, more internal, the kind of freedom that breaks the soul open and forces it to confront itself. And gratitude, false, forced, inherited gratitude, is the enemy of that freedom. Because you cannot be free while you're still bowing to values you didn't choose. You cannot be free while you're still thanking people for surviving the system they helped build. You cannot be free while you're still afraid to say, I want more, I deserve more, and no, I will not apologize for it. This is what Nietzsche meant by the transvaluation of values, the destruction of every virtue that was built to tame you, the rebirth of values forged not in guilt, but in fire. And gratitude, for all its sweetness, often hides that guilt at its core. It tells you that your hunger is ungrateful, that your rebellion is dishonor, that your refusal to accept what you've been given is betrayal. But Nietzsche would ask, betrayal of what? A lie? A cage? A shallow second-hand morality that kept you obedient, small, quiet? Then yes, betray it. Betray it proudly, because the world you were handed was not built for your flourishing. It was built to be efficient, to function, to stay stable. You were told to be grateful because gratitude makes you manageable. A grateful man doesn't riot. He doesn't revolt. He doesn't reinvent. But Nietzsche didn't write for the grateful man. He wrote for the dangerous one. The one who doesn't ask, what should I be thankful for? The one who asks, what can I become if I stop pretending to be satisfied? That's the question that breaks the loop. Because once you ask it, honestly, you begin to see how much of your life has been shaped not by your potential, but by your compliance. You see how often you've thanked those who stifled you, how often you praised the lessons that taught you to endure instead of escape, how often you bowed, not from reverence, but from fear. And once you see that clearly, you can't go back. You start speaking differently, moving differently, thinking differently. You stop using gratitude as a shield. You start using clarity as a weapon. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing being misunderstood. You stop fearing the word ungrateful. Because you know the truth now. You're not ungrateful. You're awake. Awake to the lie that told you to be thankful for pain you didn't deserve. Awake to the people who called you arrogant when you stopped settling. Awake to the systems that celebrated you when you bowed and shamed you when you stood. Nietzsche believed that shame was a sickness, a sign of internalized weakness passed down through generations. And nowhere does that shame hide more elegantly than inside obligatory gratitude, the kind that tells you to smile while you're drowning, the kind that makes you say thank you when what you mean is never again. But you don't owe thanks for survival. You owe yourself the life that comes after it. That's the Nietzschean revolt. Not a loud scream, but a cold, quiet reordering of your internal hierarchy. You stop asking the world what you should value, and you start answering the question for yourself. And when you do, when you speak, create, move, desire without apology, they will call you a monster. Good. Let them. Because to a world built on submission, clarity looks monstrous, desire looks dangerous, strength looks cruel, and self-respect looks like arrogance. But Nietzsche knew this game. He knew what happens when you escape the maze of borrowed virtues. You become untouchable, because no one can manipulate you with praise. No one can control you with guilt. No one can buy your silence with a pat on the head and a moral fable about being thankful. You've seen too much. You've remembered who you were before they taught you to perform. You've let the false self burn. And what's left? Not a follower, not a disciple, a creator, a becoming, a soul that thanks nothing except the will it took to survive the lie and build a truth. So if you're still waiting for permission to stop being grateful, this is it. You don't need to thank the past. You don't need to thank those who held you back. You don't need to thank the world for allowing you to exist. You thank yourself for not dying in the performance, for walking through fire and refusing to sing hymns to the flames, for building something sacred, not out of duty, but out of truth. That's not ungrateful. That's godlike. And Nietzsche would tell you to never kneel again.